talking today about Saturn opposite Venus. So when Saturn is opposite a planet, we become aware of the limited aspect of that planet. So for Venus, Venus is our desire to enjoy life, our capacity to enjoy life, our desire and capacity to enjoy others, which takes the form of things like romance, love, beauty, wanting to enjoy that. And Saturn is the planet of limitations, time, boundaries, where we have to face the often painful realities of life. They're not really painful, especially once we grow up and we become mature about the truth. Then they're not painful realities at all. In fact, they're the things that we all revere and respect the most. It's when we take stock of our life and that that we have the gift of life and the gift of time, then we really appreciate the fact that we're alive, and we appreciate the time we can spend with others. Saturn is really the one that gives us that reverence for the fragile nature of life, and that we don't have forever and nothing is guaranteed. So these things can come together when Saturn influences Venus, especially. It can bring that focus and that quality into our personal dynamic. And we take each other for granted so much. And Venus is the part of us that doesn't, that appreciates everyone, appreciates everything. That appreciation of beauty. And really, appreciation is one of the biggest Venus traits. Appreciation and, contentment also with what we have, and just with the fact that we're alive and that we have enough food, or whatever it is that we have, that whatever the advantages are. We're not owed anything in life. Everything we have actually has been given to us. And we don't understand that. We forget it. You could say, well, what do you mean? Nobody's ever given me anything. What are you talking about? You didn't ask to be born. You were just born. You didn't, the earth just gives abundance. All the food that you eat, let's say, the reason you're alive is because there's air to breathe, there's warmth of some sort, there's some kind of food. You didn't do anything. Even if you grow your own food, you don't grow the food. You put the seed in the ground and God grows the food. You don't know how to make the seed become a plant. You put it in the ground, but then some magic happens and it becomes food. Right? And so just the appreciation of what we have, and that we didn't do anything to really deserve it or to earn it on some level. It was just given. It's been given, and it's always being given. And that's just on the survival level. That has nothing to do with the grace that comes from other people. Think of all the people in your life who are tolerant, patient, and kind to you, even though you know that you oftentimes fall short of it. And it's okay, we're all like that. But how much do we really appreciate that? How much do we really appreciate those who loved us, our parents, even though they all made their mistakes and they're flawed people, or our relationship partners who really try to, hang in there with us, or our friends who really try and who show us kindness on any level. And we can say, well, it's because I did that, and okay, yeah, you also do it. We all do it for each other. But again, Venus is first the thing that allows us to actually appreciate that, to really appreciate it and feel that beauty of life and that joy of life. Not to mention the world we live in, the sunsets and the beaches and the trees and the brooks, and even the technologies, the computers and the things that are just beautiful and joyful. So this, Venus gives us this appreciation, but Saturn shows us that no matter how much all that is, no matter how beautiful all that is, you only get so much of it. And it shows us what we typically feel, which is, yeah, there's all that good stuff, but there's not this, there's not this, not this, not this, not this. But you didn't like that. But this isn't beautiful. But I don't like this. But constant complaining about everything, which is what humans tend to do. we lose the appreciation. And so, for instance, when Saturn is opposite Venus, we can maybe tend to not be focusing on it because Saturn is showing the limit. On one level, it can show where we don't have reverence and we don't have appreciation. Many times, in fact, maybe every time when Venus is opposite Saturn, Saturn's probably retrograde because Venus never gets too far from the Sun. So it can be showing a kind of, potential to feel unappreciated yourself, rather than seeing how much you're appreciating others. So it's always the thing with Venus, there's the idiom that says, whatever it is you want more of, start doing it. If you're not feeling appreciated or respected, start appreciating and respecting others more and see what happens. Just try it, right? If you don't feel like you're, getting enough, start giving more and see what happens. And so this kind of balancing and harmonizing comes from, or can definitely be at the heart of a Saturn-Venus opposition, especially. It can also be the thing that makes us stuck and calcified in our fears around it and our justification. This is always a possibility with Saturn. Saturn is where we can be very stuck in something, very stuck in our ways, very much about our fears in the past and how the past is looming over our mind. And saying, well, that's easy for you to say because, my parents never appreciated me. I wasn't taken care of and blah, blah, blah. None of us were. We all feel that way on some level. That's just life. We all are going to feel that way somehow, in some way. And some people deserve to feel it more. Yeah, we all deserve it. We all deserve to feel that way. We all have the stories. That's just a given. So, in other words, you're not special. Because you have your version of it means, so what? You're not special. It's not even important. What's important is what you take forward in your life. And so, when we feel that Saturn crunching in on Venus, we have to be careful of feeling justified in our sort of bitter solitude and our lack of giving. What Saturn can do is want to hold on for ourselves. Well, I need to make sure that, before I compromise and before I give, that I'm going to get it back first, that I'm going to get first. So again, Saturn can tend to close things down and say, well, and be hyper aware when it relates with Venus of how much the other person is given to me, how much the other person compromises. What do I get? What am I getting? What am I getting? And because they could possibly have, if it's in a natal chart, have experienced quite a bit of that. If someone has Saturn opposite Venus in the natal chart, it's very possible that they did have some heavy boundaries, especially as it relates to showing affection and showing appreciation. Maybe they don't feel appreciated. Maybe it was a much heavier kind of lack of appreciation that came their way. So again, they can make the case very clearly. They can say, yeah, but you don't understand. I was this or that, and they didn't feel appreciated at all. It could very well be the case. But it doesn't mean that you can't still evolve that and that you don't have to evolve that. It's still the same issue. It's just, in that case, it's more severe. That the person definitely has that as a theme in their life where they didn't feel appreciated. So, again, one of the things that happens when Saturn also influences is, again, it can cut both ways. And it can either cut in the way that says, because I wasn't so appreciated, then I have to be careful because people can take advantage of you and da-da-da. Or you can get a remarkable level of sensitivity and appreciation for all the respect that you get. It cuts both ways. So for instance, someone who maybe has Saturn opposite Venus came from a heavy background where they weren't appreciated so much. So what happens is they wind up becoming so sensitive to any kind of appreciation. And they're so appreciative of it. And they respect and they can have deep sensitivity to those who weren't respected, to those who weren't appreciated. And really, and so any kind of appreciation that they get, they love it so much. Any kind of respect that they get. And when someone tries to go out of their way to help them and care for them, they appreciate it so much because they're not used to having it. And at the same time, they really make a commitment to helping others appreciate themselves and that thing that they lack as well. And again, this also makes the Saturn part sensitive. This is also Venus sharing its energy with Saturn. So instead of Saturn being the fearful, like, I need to protect myself, when Venus influences Saturn in that mutual aspect, it softens that kind of protection, that sort of calcified shell that feels that pain. Because you're going to feel the pain more wherever Saturn is, or whatever Saturn's influencing. You'll feel the pain when Saturn's influencing Venus, that, oh, they didn't appreciate that. Oh, that hurts. But then Venus, if it's also aspecting Saturn back, says, okay, but this is just the nature of life. And okay, so any appreciation I do get, I really can feel it, and I really respect it, and it humbles me. And I'm grateful. I have enormous gratitude. Rather than enormous fear, I have gratitude. And it's something that I can make a commitment to in my life to, I'm focused on seeing that everyone is appreciated, for example. So Saturn-Venus has that quality of this mutual benefit and this mutual respect that can come. But a person maybe has to cycle through that kind of hyper-transactional feeling, that fear that if they compromise, the other person is not going to appreciate it, and the pain of that. The pain of always feeling like the one who's doing the compromise. It's always up to me to do it. I'm always the one who has to do it. We feel that pain in Saturn. Saturn is where we feel the pain. And also where we need to overcome it and stop personalizing it. One of the big concepts of Saturn is where we need to stop taking things so personally. When you think you're this little body with this little story and this little past of this life and this little amount of time, and this is all you got, which is the Saturn mistake. When you think that's all you got, then you're going to take everything hyper personally. Everything's going to be personal. You'll be thin-skinned and easily wounded. When you start to know yourself better and you make a deeper commitment to truth and growth through introspection, silence, solitude, facing your fears, which is the power of Saturn, then all of that opens up. And you're not so defined by every little slight. You're not like a beggar groveling for appreciation. This is why Saturn's the beggar. But the beggar also has enormous power because he's content with much less. Because he's been a beggar, he knows what it's like to be a beggar. Only he can be a king, it's said. Only one who has been a beggar can actually be a king. A real king. Not one sitting on a throne, but the king of reality. That means one who is self-possessed, who knows the self, and who is not looking to be defined by some external power, some external token of appreciation, or something like that. So it's big stuff. Saturn always is the one where we always have to make peace with Saturn. And because Venus is often representative of the ones we're trying to make peace with, or to get something from, or to be appreciated by, or to have people like us, Saturn-Venus interactions are big in sensitizing that whole cycle of sort of karma that revolves around other people and making peace with it. And so when the planet is retrograde, it is naturally closer to the Earth, and it's more of an internal psychological factor, and it's much brighter. in the sky. It's very bright. So when a planet is opposite the sun in a natal chart, it's much brighter than at any other time, and it's much closer to the Earth. So when we get Saturn opposite the sun, it's much more illuminated as well. The sun is sharing its energy with it, and it's illuminating these Saturn qualities of life, which are the ones that I mentioned. The need to focus your energy, the need to make a commitment, the need to not waste your time, because Saturn becomes a deeply psychological influence because it's retrograde, and the things that it rules tend to back up and we tend to not be so confident in it. And that makes us actually have to focus our energy on it, quite deeply. And so it's the sharing. A few other things that you recognize when Saturn is opposite the sun is it really makes for a time of humility as a psychological force. And as a physical force, we can feel much more tired. We can feel tired, even things like constipated, like our bowels don't move as quickly. These things have to do with fire, they have to do with the sun. When someone has a strong sun, they usually have a lot of digestive power. The sun rules. It rules the digestion. In Ayurveda, it said that the life force lives in the belly, in the digestive tract. And, how easily we digest our food and assimilate and, get the nutrients, that's how much vitality and energy we have. And so, again, one of the physical properties that we notice when the sun is opposite Saturn is we might tend to want to sleep a little longer. We might tend to not have our bowels moving as regularly. Feeling that lack of energy actually makes us more humble, an authentic humility. It's not a pseudo-humility that's actually just frustration, but it's an actual humility. But the other is also possible, and again, depending on a lot of factors like the dignity, what houses it falls in, what signs it falls in, we can also be aware of the shadow side when Saturn is opposite the sun, where we literally lack confidence. Again, the sun psychologically also feels like confidence. We tend to lack confidence because we become very aware of all the mistakes we've made, and we don't want to make those mistakes again. We don't want to looking foolish and feeling embarrassed, and the complexes that accompany that are also related to Saturn. And this can also be a catalyst for just kind of showing up in a smaller way and then being kind of grouchy and kind of cranky about and sort of bitter about the chances we never got and how mistreated we were and all of those other things. And that can kind of disguise itself as humility sometimes. You ever notice sometimes you see people who they put on this veneer of humility, but it's actually a lack of confidence kind of slipping in through the back door. Actually, they're not very humble, because once you start to scratch the surface, you realize that they have a lot of frustration and bitterness underneath that, quote, humility, right? You'll see that. And underneath it all, they're not really authentically humble, like, a yogi or a monk is authentically humble. But there's a lot of power in authentic humility. Humility takes a lot of courage, and it's a transformation. It's a reverence for the Sun-Saturn paradigm. Humility comes when we've used our power and we realize that it's limited. So we become humbled by the world of time. We become humbled by our limitations, and it allows us to authentically focus our attention and use the power we have wisely, not to dominate others, but to be of service. So the power of the Sun-Saturn, in the highest sense, shows up as a humility. And it's also the power of Saturn as well. It's the Sun illuminating Saturn, and Saturn concentrating and focusing the Sun. Often comes out as this humility and this reverence. But in the frustrated part of it, when it's not as dignified, when it's not as powerful, and when it's not as conscious, it has this bitterness, this even sort of tyrant aspect, where this desire to conquer and to concentrate on winning can also come out, because again, the sun is the king and Saturn is it actually represents like the kingdom and other people. And there can be an adversarial relationship also that comes out, especially if you get it in fire signs or in some places where the energy isn't as clean. Or again, it can be even the shadow side of the tyrant archetype, because we have the tyrant and the servant. This is like Saturn the king, Saturn the servant, the sun, the king. They have a dignified nature and they have a shadow nature. The king can put on the veneer of being humble, but underneath it all, he's a thin-skinned tyrant. And humility is just a kind of dress he puts on to bond with the common man. Underneath it all, he's haughty and arrogant. And maybe he's really confused about it. Maybe he's very much afraid of his power. I'm not speaking of you. Like, you're kind of afraid of your power, so you are sort of have this appearance of being humble, but then as soon as someone starts getting at something that really pricks your soft spot, this frustrated tyrant comes out, and it's racked with bitterness, and well, it's easy for you to say because you never had this happen, and you see where people are hanging on to the past. This is the complexes of Saturn. And this is where that making peace with life and making peace with the past turns into reverence, humility, and a lot of integrity. So these are big things when Saturn is opposite the sun. It brings in these two big players, and they're really shadows of each other. The sun is the father of Saturn in ancient myth. So it really brings these two players. One is the light, and Saturn is really like the shadow, and the fears that can undermine our power. And when they oppose, it can, both curtail the sun and also concentrate it. It can illuminate Saturn energy and give us that where our fears are brought into the light, or it can frustrate those Saturn themes depending on other factors. So keep that in mind.